Get out of here and wait outside. You have no reason to be here. That voice sliced through the quiet afternoon air of Westchester County Airport. Cold, dismissive, absolute. The lounge attendant pointed sharply toward the sliding glass doors, his voice rising. I'll call security if you don't leave right now. People like you don't fly on flights like this. Loretta Bennett stood frozen. She said nothing, not because she couldn't, but because she wouldn't. The silence that followed wrapped the scene in an eerie stillness. The distant roll of thunder murmured through the steel and glass building, and light rain began to patter across the tarmac. At 74, Loretta's spine was no longer what it once was, but her dignity was unbending. What the attendant didn't realize, and what would become his greatest regret, was that he had just humiliated the woman who owned the very company he worked for. Loretta Bennett, founder and majority owner of Bennett Aviation, had returned home from London after securing a $1.2 billion deal that would expand the company into Europe. All she wanted now was a quiet seat in the premium lounge before boarding her private jet back to Connecticut. But the moment she approached the entryway to the first-class lounge, the atmosphere changed. Jason Miller, the lounge manager, stood behind the counter. His eyes scanned her face, then traveled down to her modest tan coat, her brown felt hat tilted neatly over salt and pepper curls, and finally to the mahogany cane she used for balance. I'm sorry, ma'am, Jason said, his tone laced with condescension. This lounge is for first-class passengers only. Loretta gave him a polite, patient look. I know, that's why I'm here. He didn't blink. Please present your boarding pass and membership card so we can verify your credentials. This wasn't her first time being questioned, but rarely was it this overt or this loud. For over a decade, Loretta had slipped into this lounge without issue. In her younger years, she might have worn stilettos and designer coats. Now she preferred comfort, low heels, practical clothing, and a warmth that came not from wealth but wisdom. Without fuss, she reached into her bag and handed over her platinum card and boarding pass. Jason took them with the wariness of someone inspecting a fake ID. He held both up to the overhead light, angling them like a suspicious TSA agent. These look unusual, he muttered. He glanced over her shoulder toward the entrance. A tall, middle-aged white man with silver hair and a navy blazer had just arrived, dragging a polished suitcase behind him. Jason's posture straightened. One moment, he told Loretta, gesturing toward the door. You'll need to wait outside while I verify this. We need to protect our high-end customers' privacy. The implication wasn't subtle. Loretta offered a quiet nod and walked back toward the sliding glass doors, her cane tapping softly against the floor. Rain misted the pavement now. She stood beneath the overhang, her tan coat growing darker as it absorbed the drizzle. Every cold drop reminded her, even after everything she had built, even at her age, even owning the jets they walked onto by home, she was still being told to prove she belonged. Behind her, Jason's voice shifted dramatically. Good afternoon, Mr. Patterson. Your flight is boarding shortly. Please come right in. Loretta turned her head slightly and watched the elderly white man glide through the door without being asked for a single document. Jason even carried his bag for him. Her chest tightened, not from surprise that had long faded, but from the dull ache of tired injustice. She'd lived enough decades to see this happen in restaurants, banks, boardrooms, but never like this, never on the front steps of her own company. The rain thickened, her cane slipped slightly against the concrete. She repositioned her grip and steadied herself. One by one, white passengers strolled past her, men and women younger and older than her, all unchallenged. Some gave her odd glances. A few clutched their bags closer. Most ignored her completely. She waited. 5 minutes, then 10, then 25. When Jason finally emerged again, his eyes still fogged with doubt, he gave a half-hearted shrug. All right, I'll let you in, because of the rain, but we'll be keeping a close eye on you. The words pierced deeper than any thunderclap. Loretta nodded once, stepping inside with grace. Her coat was damp. Her back ached. But her gaze? Steady. The moment she entered the premium lounge, warm golden light from the chandeliers bathed her face. Plush leather seating, marble counters, and chilled champagne flutes sparkled. But the glow only made the insult feel harsher. Jason leaned toward the receptionist behind the counter, whispering just loud enough. Keep an eye on that old woman. Let me know if anything's off. Loretta heard every word. She moved to a chair in the far corner and sat, slowly, deliberately, with the kind of quiet power that didn't need to explain itself. Around her, no one noticed. Or if they did, they pretended not to. No one realized she was Loretta Bennett, founder of Bennett Aviation, the woman who'd built a regional fleet into a billion-dollar empire. Her name still held weight in business circles. Her influence had shaped routes, safety protocols, even airline design. But here in the lounge she paid for, she was treated like a trespasser. Across the room, a young female attendant named Mia Collins watched with growing unease. She had seen the entire encounter, saw how Jason laughed with Mr. Patterson, then glared at the black elderly woman in the rain. Something inside her stirred, a whisper that said, "This isn't right." But she stayed silent. She was too new, too afraid. Loretta folded her hands in her lap and waited, not just for her flight, but for the truth to show itself like it always did. Jason returned to his desk, glancing at her repeatedly. Her platinum pass and CEO designation had been clear. He'd seen it, but his mind refused to connect the dots. To him, a real CEO wouldn't look like this. Not this old woman with soft-spoken dignity. Not someone alone, without an entourage, wearing practical shoes and moving slowly with a cane. She didn't match the image of power he carried in his head. Loretta closed her eyes briefly, the warmth of the lounge seeping into her cold bones, but not enough to melt the ice that had formed. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every older woman spoken down to, every person of color asked to prove themselves, every quiet injustice passed off as policy. She would not scream. She would not threaten. She didn't need to. She would let them continue. She would let them dig their hole, and then she would show them who she really was. Because the storm outside, that wasn't the real danger. The real storm was still coming, and Loretta Bennett would be the one holding the lightning. The soft hum of conversation in the premium lounge couldn't mask the invisible wall that surrounded Loretta Bennett. The moment she stepped inside, every pair of eyes seemed to glance her way, some curious, others dismissive, a few subtly alarmed. No one saw her for who she was. They only saw who they thought she couldn't be. Loretta eased herself into a leather chair tucked in a corner by the window. She took her time, not because she wanted to, but because her body now demanded it. A gentle ache throbbed in her right knee, the result of an old injury and too many years spent building the empire others were now profiting from. She folded her rain-damp shawl across her lap, placed her cane gently beside her, and leaned back, watching the storm clouds outside gather in thicker folds. From across the lounge, Jason Miller's eyes followed her. He didn't like it, that quiet presence, that unbothered stillness. To him, the lounge was a sanctuary for the elite, the kind of elite who wore tailored blazers and Rolex watches, who arrived with assistants and carried MacBooks. Not a quiet, solitary black woman in her 70s with a sensible coat and worn leather shoes. Jason leaned toward the receptionist beside him, lowering his voice but not enough. "Make sure you log her name," he murmured. "If anything goes wrong, I don't want her slipping under the radar." Loretta heard him, again, but she remained still. She had learned long ago that rage only served the comfortable. The truly powerful didn't need to explode to be heard. They needed only to wait. Meanwhile, Mia Collins, the youngest staff member on shift, busied herself restocking bottled water in the cooler. But her mind wasn't on the bottles. It was back at the entrance, on Loretta, standing in the rain while Jason waved white passengers through like royalty. She had seen the woman hand over the correct boarding pass. She saw Jason hold it up as if it were a forgery, and she saw him allow a dozen others through without so much as a glance. What makes her different? Mia asked herself silently. She already knew the answer. Everyone did, but no one would say it. Black, old, alone. That's all they saw. Mia glanced at Loretta now, her posture elegant, her hands resting gently on her lap. She didn't fidget, she didn't scowl. She simply observed. A gust of wind rattled the windows. Rain hit harder. Back at the desk, Jason returned to his monitor. Loretta's profile was still up on the screen. L. Bennett, owner stamped clearly beside her name. He stared at it, then minimized the window. Whether it was denial or disbelief, even he didn't know. But the idea that the old woman now seated quietly just feet from him was the Loretta Bennett, aviation mogul, founder of the company, and one of the most respected names in the industry, didn't fit inside his head. Owner or not, he mumbled to himself, doesn't mean she belongs in this space. Moments later, another guest approached, a white woman in her mid-30s with designer luggage and a sleek business suit. Jason lit up, stepping around the desk to greet her personally. Welcome back, Miss Harper. Your seat's prepared. Can I get you anything? Harper smiled. Just a water. Jason walked her to her seat like an attentive butler. Not once did he ask for her boarding pass. Loretta watched. She didn't judge, but she noted. She had built her empire on noticing the things others ignored. Facial expressions, shifting tones, the subtle changes in people when they thought no one was watching. She wasn't angry. She was building her case. Mia finally gathered the courage to approach. She knelt slightly beside Loretta's chair, clearing her throat. Would you like anything to drink, ma'am? Loretta turned, her eyes soft but steady. Some hot tea would be lovely, thank you. Mia nodded, coming right up. But just as she stood, Jason walked past and whispered sharply, stick to your section. Mia froze. She asked for tea. I'll handle it, Jason snapped before walking off with a tight jaw. Mia looked down, ashamed, not of Loretta, but of herself, for not speaking up, for not having the strength. Loretta smiled gently at her, sensing the conflict. It's all right, child, she said softly. The right time always comes. Mia nodded, blinking fast, and walked away. Jason returned moments later with the tea. He placed it on a small silver tray in front of Loretta and stepped back. We'll be watching, he muttered, not meeting her eyes. Loretta sipped the tea. I would expect nothing less. For the next hour, she sat quietly, sipping slowly, watching the storm clouds thicken, both outside the window and inside this lounge. Every few minutes, a new passenger entered, white, polished, greeted warmly, never questioned. No one else sat near Loretta, not because the chairs weren't free, but because no one wanted to. A few looked at her the way people look at someone who might have wandered in from another terminal, someone who needed help or directions, someone who didn't belong. Jason paced more now, unable to relax. Loretta's calm unnerved him more than confrontation ever could. She wasn't rattled. She wasn't desperate. She wasn't trying to prove anything. And that made her dangerous. He passed by her chair once more. Ma'am, can I see your boarding pass again? Just for security protocol. Loretta looked up at him slowly, setting her tea down. You saw it once. I just need to double check. You didn't double check for Mr. Patterson or Miss Harper. Jason flushed. Why me? He hesitated. I'm just following protocol. Loretta leaned back in her seat, her gaze never wavering. Then be sure to follow it for everyone, not just the ones who make you uncomfortable. Jason didn't respond. He turned sharply and walked away. From the side, Mia saw it all. Her heart beat faster, her cheeks hot with shame. She wanted to say something, but her voice caught in her throat. The lounge grew quieter. Outside, thunder cracked closer. Loretta sat like a stone in a river, still, resilient, unmoved by the current of bias that swirled around her. What they didn't understand, what they would never understand, was that her silence wasn't submission. It was strategy. She was letting the system reveal itself, letting it prove her point. And when the moment came, when it was time to speak, she would do so with such force and clarity that every insult, every whisper, every sideways glance would collapse under its own weight. For now, she waited. Not fit for first class? They would soon learn who decided what class meant and who truly belonged. The glow of the premium lounge seemed deliberately indifferent to Loretta Bennett. Polished marble, crystal chandeliers, and the low hum of elite travelers filled the space, yet none of it touched her. She sat in the far corner, wrapped in silence, sipping tea that had long gone lukewarm. Across the room, Jason Miller shifted behind the counter, pretending to review flight logs but constantly cutting glances toward her. Loretta could feel it, the scrutiny, that anxious, suspicious buzz reserved not for people who might cause trouble, but for people who didn't look like they belonged. Especially the ones who didn't look like they were spending $75,000 on a private transatlantic flight. Loretta sat straight despite the dull ache in her back. Her cane rested against her knee, her shawl neatly folded across her lap. Her skin, deep brown and creased by time, radiated a quiet kind of nobility. But no one saw that. They saw a black old woman alone, which in places like this apparently meant a threat. Jason finally stood. He couldn't shake it. Her calmness was too unsettling, her posture too self-assured. She wasn't fidgeting, wasn't checking her watch, wasn't scrolling her phone in discomfort like someone waiting for rescue. She wasn't waiting at all. She was watching. He walked toward her. "Ma'am," he said, voice clipped, "just letting you know, we'll continue to monitor all guest activity in the lounge, for everyone's safety." Loretta didn't blink. "And what activity exactly are you concerned about from me?" Jason stiffened. "This is just standard language." "No, it's not." Her voice was calm, almost gentle, but laced with something razor sharp beneath the surface. A scalpel, not a hammer. Jason faltered. I, I'm just doing my job." "Then let me ask again," Loretta said, resting both hands on the curve of her cane. "What is it about me that requires extra monitoring?" Jason looked away. "We review everyone equally." Loretta's head tilted slightly. "Do you?" Just then the sliding glass door to the lounge hissed open. A trio of young men in designer suits entered, laughing, slapping each other on the shoulders. None of them looked older than 30. One of them dropped his ID. The receptionist rushed out to hand it back, without ever asking for verification. Jason turned quickly, pretending to busy himself behind the counter again. Loretta's eyes didn't follow him. They stayed forward, still, patient. A storm cloud with no thunder. Not yet. Meanwhile, Mia Collins, the young attendant, hovered near the espresso machine, hands clenched behind her back. She had seen it all. Again. How Jason addressed Loretta like a warning. How white men waltzed through without even showing a pass. Mia's stomach turned. She'd only worked here 6 months, but she had seen enough. She'd grown up in Yonkers. Her mother was a nurse. Her grandmother raised her while her mom worked nights. She'd seen what quiet women of color endured. The looks, the policies twisted into weapons, the soft silencing. Now here she was watching another elder. A stranger, yes, but someone who reminded her of the woman who raised her, being treated like a liability. And I'm doing nothing, Mia thought, just like everyone else. She was ashamed of that thought. Across the room, one of the new guests, the youngest of the 3 suited men, shouted out to Jason, laughing. "Hey, Jay, can we get a round of Glenfiddich, the 21? Jason lit up. "Of course, Mr. Dellinger, anything you want." He personally delivered their drinks, chuckling along at some private joke, never once asking for ID or boarding passes. Loretta sipped the last of her tea, watching. When Jason returned to his desk, she rose. Slowly, steadily, her cane clicked gently against the floor with each step as she walked up to the counter. Jason glanced up, startled. "Yes?" "I'd like another cup of tea," she said. He blinked. Right. One moment." Jason poured the tea and handed it to her without a word. Loretta took it, her eyes resting on his face. "You have a strong sense of who you think belongs in places like this." Jason said nothing. "I've been in and out of this lounge for over 15 years, Loretta continued. "I know every corner of it, every redesign. I know the names of the contractors who laid this marble and the engineers who designed the ceiling airflow." Jason's face twisted. I'm sorry, I don't understand what you're saying." "No," Loretta said, "you don't. That's the problem." And with that, she turned and walked back to her seat. Jason stood there trying to decipher what just happened, but the knots in his chest only grew tighter. He looked at her file again. L. Bennett. Same name as the founder. Coincidence? Could it be? He shook the thought away. "No, impossible. The founder is probably dead or retired somewhere in Europe. not sitting here with a cane waiting for a jet. Still, something about her tone, her confidence, sent a tremor through his chest. Minutes passed, then 20, then 30. Outside, thunder clapped again. Lightning traced white streaks across the charcoal sky. Loretta's phone buzzed quietly on her lap. She glanced down. Gulfstream on standby. Boarding in 20 minutes. Captain Davis awaiting clearance. She replied with a simple, "Understood." Just then a voice came from the other side of the lounge. "Excuse me," came the loud, breezy tone of one of the suited guests. "Dellinger the youngest. Can someone please explain why that elderly woman has been staring at us for the past hour?" Jason looked over. Loretta hadn't been staring. She'd been sitting in the same dignified silence since she arrived. But now that Dellinger had spoken, everyone looked her way, some amused, others judgmental. Jason seized the opportunity. He walked over to her seat, lowering his voice but keeping a forced authority in his tone. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you not to make any of our guests uncomfortable." Loretta looked up slowly. "Uncomfortable?" "They're concerned about the way you're watching them." "I'm not watching them," she said. "I'm watching you." Jason stiffened. "Excuse me?" "You," Loretta repeated. "Your actions, your assumptions, your choices. I'm documenting every moment, and I suggest you stop talking before you make things worse." Jason blinked. She didn't raise her voice, didn't move, but something in her tone made the hairs rise on the back of his neck. He backed away, muttering, "You should be careful how you speak to staff." "I'm very careful," Loretta said softly, folding her hands again. "Always." Behind the counter, Mia was shaking. She knows something. Jason tried to regain composure, turning toward the suited guests again, who were now openly laughing. But for the first time all day, Loretta smiled. It wasn't a smile of amusement. It was the kind of smile that came before an avalanche. Because now the game had changed. Jason and his kind had made one fatal error. They mistook her patience for weakness. But the truth was this. Loretta wasn't watching to judge them. She was watching to let them prove her point. She was giving them the rope they were so eager to tighten around their own necks. In 20 minutes, she would walk to the runway. And then the next chapter of this humiliation, the part they could never undo, would begin. They thought they were protecting their real passengers. They just didn't realize the realest passenger in that entire airport was the old black woman they told to leave. The rain was steady now, soft but unrelenting. It tapped on the runway like a slow, ticking clock. Loretta Bennett stepped through the sliding glass doors of the premium lounge, her cane tapping against the polished floor. Her pace was unhurried, but not from frailty. She walked like someone who knew the path ahead of her belonged to her, even if no one else recognized it yet. She passed row after row of floor-to-ceiling windows, where a gleaming white Gulfstream G700 waited patiently on the wet tarmac. Her jet, sleek, custom outfitted. Worth more than most of the men in that lounge would earn in 3 lifetimes. As she approached the jet, the air shifted. On the steps leading up to the open cabin door stood a tall woman in a crisp navy blue uniform. Emma Roberts, head flight attendant. Known for her punctuality, sharp eye, and more quietly among the staff, for deciding within 2 seconds whether a passenger fit the look. And Loretta did not. Emma stepped forward, heels clicking on the metal steps, posture taut as piano wire. She scanned Loretta from head to toe. The damp shawl, the weathered cane, the no-nonsense low heels. The face of a woman who had lived many years and survived every one of them. Emma's expression hardened. "Excuse me," she said loudly, her voice rising over the sound of rainfall and distant jet engines. "This is a private flight. You're in the wrong place." Loretta paused. Her expression remained composed, the same serene restraint she had worn all afternoon, but her hands tightened slightly on the handle of her cane. "I know exactly where I am," Loretta said, her voice steady. Emma's eyes narrowed. "You may think that," she said, folding her arms, "but this aircraft is reserved for VIP clients. The commercial terminal is located back near the main road. It's about a mile walk if you're capable." A few members of the ground crew, standing off to the side near a luggage cart, turned their heads. One of them chuckled uncomfortably, then looked away, pretending to check a clipboard. Loretta remained motionless, her face unreadable. "I have the proper documentation," she said. "Boarding pass, credentials, identification." Emma didn't flinch. She didn't even look at the documents Loretta offered. Instead, she gave a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I've worked this route for 6 years," she said, voice like steel. "I know who flies on this jet, and with all due respect, you don't fit the profile." A gust of wind carried a fresh wave of rain across the tarmac. Loretta stood firm. She'd weathered bigger storms. "Check the manifest," she said quietly. Emma gave a short laugh. "Ma'am," she said pointedly, loud enough for the rain-drenched crew nearby to hear, "this isn't a city bus. You don't just show up and climb aboard. Do you know how much it costs to fly this jet across the Atlantic?" She leaned in slightly, her voice slow and deliberate. $75,000. One way. Her gaze was sharp, cutting, not just challenging Loretta's presence, but her very worth. Loretta didn't blink. "I know what it costs," she said softly. "I've paid that bill many times." But Emma wasn't listening. She'd already turned toward her walkie-talkie. "This is Roberts at Gate 4. We have an unauthorized individual attempting to board the Gulfstream," she said, requesting immediate assistance. Loretta sighed inwardly. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment the truth would begin unraveling in front of witnesses. A flurry of motion behind her. Jason Miller had just arrived, breathless, eager, shoulders squared like he was preparing to be a hero in his own little narrative. He didn't wait to hear the situation. He looked at Loretta with the same rehearsed authority he used in the lounge. "You need to leave immediately, ma'am," Jason said sharply. "This is restricted. You're not on the passenger list." "I am," Loretta replied without emotion. "Check it." Emma stepped forward again, arms crossed. Her confidence was a fortress vow. "You can't intimidate us," she snapped. "I've seen plenty of people try to sneak onto this aircraft. I know who our real clients are." And in that moment, the final wall was built. Age, race, appearance, alone. She was guilty in their eyes. Loretta stared at them both, her voice low and calm. "Are you absolutely certain?" Jason rolled his eyes. "I'm 100% certain," Emma said. "You need to step away or we'll be forced to call actual law enforcement." The rain thickened around them like a curtain, muffling everything but the heartbeat of injustice pounding in Loretta's chest. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. Across the tarmac, the flight captain, Richard Davis, had just stepped into view from the cockpit. He saw the scene unfolding and paused. He didn't approach. Not yet. Loretta raised the phone to her ear. "I'm calling someone," she said plainly. Jason smirked. "Go ahead, call whoever you want." Emma gave a laugh of her own. "She's bluffing." Loretta's voice cut clean through the downpour. "Lauren, connect me to Ethan and the executive team immediately. We have a situation at Westchester that requires urgent attention." Jason's face twitched. "Ethan?" Emma frowned. "Executive team? Of what?" Loretta locked eyes with her. "Bennett Aviation." Jason's mouth opened slightly. The words didn't register. Emma hesitated. For the first time, her posture faltered. But pride is a stubborn thing. "Do you really think saying a name means anything?" Emma said with a scoff. "That proves nothing." "Not yet," Loretta said softly, "but keep talking." In the cockpit, Captain Davis turned toward First Officer Tyler Evans, a younger man with quick instincts. Tyler raised an eyebrow, nodding toward the runway scene. "Should we check the manifest again?" Davis hesitated, then tapped on his tablet. The passenger list loaded. His eyes froze on the first line. L. Bennett, owner, CEO. He stared at it for a long second, then looked up at the woman in the rain. "No," he whispered. Emma was still posturing. "We've already told you, ma'am," she said. "This jet is not for the public. You've trespassed long enough. You need to go." Loretta didn't move. She let the words fall like water on stone. "I'm Loretta Bennett," she said softly, "founder and chairwoman of Bennett Aviation." Silence. The words rippled outward like thunder. Jason's lips parted. Emma's jaw went slack. One of the ground crew actually gasped. A drop of rain hit the tarmac with a sharp splatter. Another, and another. Loretta looked from face to face calmly. I asked you earlier if you were certain, she said. You laughed. Captain Davis emerged from the cockpit holding the tablet with her name highlighted. Tyler followed, pale. Emma, Davis called out, his voice cracked. You need to see this. Now. But Emma didn't move. The fortress of pride was crumbling, but she couldn't face it yet. Jason turned in slow horror, peeking at the screen Davis held. His knees nearly gave. CEO, he muttered. And that was the moment it all began to unravel. The rain didn't pause for dramatic effect. It poured without conscience, pelting the tarmac with icy fingers, as if nature itself was furious at what had just happened. But Loretta Bennett stood unmoved. She didn't blink, didn't flinch. She just let her words settle. I'm Loretta Bennett, founder and chairwoman of Bennett Aviation. Captain Richard Davis, still holding the glowing tablet with her name flashing at the top of the passenger manifest, couldn't breathe. Neither could First Officer Tyler Evans, who now stared at Loretta like he'd seen a ghost. Jason Miller, meanwhile, stood in stunned silence, lips parted, face drained of color. And Emma Roberts? Her pride tried to hold. Her face twitched, faltered, then froze. There were two things she could do: retreat or double down. She chose wrong. Emma let out a brittle laugh, short and sharp. Well, if you really are who you say you are, she said, chin lifting with defensive sarcasm, then you'll understand we still have security protocols. We were only doing our jobs. Loretta's eyes locked onto hers, that same quiet, piercing look, the one Emma had ignored before, the one Jason had laughed at, the one every coward in that lounge had avoided. And still, Emma pushed forward. You never once identified yourself until now, she added, voice louder, more pointed. You stood there in the rain like a lost passenger, expecting us to just guess? From behind, the ground crew shifted uncomfortably. Mia Collins, now peeking from the lounge entry, felt her stomach twist. Even Lucas Parker, the ramp supervisor, had stepped closer, shoulders tight with silent dread. Loretta didn't raise her voice. She never needed to. You made judgments the moment you saw me, she said. Not once did you ask who I was. You assumed who I wasn't. Jason tried to chime in, desperation creeping in like a leak in a sinking boat. We just didn't recognize you, ma'am, if we'd known. You knew enough, Loretta cut him off gently. A pause, one that seemed to expand across the entire airfield. I gave you several chances, she added. I asked you if you were sure. You mocked me. Emma rolled her eyes, a fatal reflex of ego. This is a misunderstanding, not misconduct. And I won't be punished for refusing to let someone wander onto a private jet based on instinct. Captain Davis stepped forward, still holding the manifest. Emma, he said quietly, she's not just a passenger. She owns the jet. She owns the airline. She built the system we're standing in. Emma still refused to look at the tablet. I'm head of flight security, she snapped, more to herself than anyone. It's my job to screen irregular activity. Is that what I am? Loretta asked. Irregular activity? Emma's lips parted, but nothing came. Loretta walked past her one step at a time, cane clicking against the wet metal stairs. Slowly, deliberately. She reached the top of the jet steps and turned. The entire ramp was watching. I built this airline from a rented 2-engine prop plane and 3 small contracts, Loretta said, voice rising over the wind. I've flown through lawsuits, storms, economic collapses, and airports that refused to service us because I was the wrong color with the wrong name. She paused. And after all of that, this right here, this humiliation delivered not by strangers, but by the people whose paychecks I signed. Jason looked down. Mia flinched. Lucas Parker swallowed hard. I wasn't going to say anything today, Loretta continued. I wasn't going to make a scene, but sometimes silence does more damage than noise. Then she looked straight at Emma. You weren't protecting this company, she said. You were protecting your assumptions. Emma took a breath, her voice trembling now. I was following training protocol. You, you looked out of place. Loretta raised an eyebrow. I looked out of place. Not acted, not behaved, just looked. And tell me, Ms. Roberts, she asked softly, what exactly does belonging look like to you? Emma didn't answer, because there was no answer she could give that wouldn't reveal the poison in the roots of her behavior. Loretta turned to Captain Davis. Clear the interior of the aircraft, she said. I will wait inside until Ethan arrives, and I want every second of today's surveillance footage pulled and secured. Davis nodded immediately. Yes, ma'am. Loretta stepped inside the jet cabin. The door remained open. Outside, the tension thickened. Jason leaned toward Emma, whispering harshly, You've really done it now. Emma's jaw clenched. Don't you start. You were right there with me. She gave us 3 chances to correct ourselves. She gave us 0 confirmation, Emma snapped, voice rising. What, am I supposed to bow every time someone says I own this place? Jason didn't reply, because the rain kept falling, and somewhere deep down, he already knew. Inside the jet, Loretta sat at the head of the conference table, the one she had custom designed years ago, surrounded by white leather seating and chrome trim. She didn't touch anything, just waited. The silence inside contrasted with the gathering storm outside. Her phone buzzed. Ethan Bennett, on my way. SUV's 2 minutes out. She placed the phone down gently and looked toward the open cabin door. Emma still stood at the foot of the stairs, arguing with herself in hushed tones, trying to justify what had already been recorded, spoken, and witnessed. But nothing can be unsaid once the whole world hears it. Loretta closed her eyes for a moment. She had been spit on during sit-ins in the 60s. She'd been passed over by banks in the 70s, been underestimated in every decade since. But this was different. This was her house, her name, her people, and they still didn't see her, not because they couldn't, because they didn't want to. That was Emma's last mistake, not the refusal at the door, not calling security, not even raising her voice. Her last mistake was assuming Loretta would walk away quietly, just like all the others she'd made disappear with a dismissive command. But Loretta didn't disappear. She built empires, and now she was going to tear this one apart. Starting from the inside, rain sheeted down the windows of the Gulfstream G700 like a waterfall of glass. Inside, Loretta Bennett sat quietly at the head of the onboard conference table, her cane resting against the leather seat beside her. The walls of the cabin were wrapped in the Oftiana, expensive silence of executive travel. Thick carpeting, brushed chrome, and the kind of engineered stillness that dulled everything but breath and thought. But outside the aircraft, the terminal was anything but quiet. The tension crackled through the air like static before lightning. On the tarmac, Jason Miller and Emma Roberts stood stiff and pale. Neither spoke. Neither moved. They just waited in the cold downpour, frozen by the moment they had helped create. Emma tried to appear composed. Her arms were crossed, lips pressed into a thin line. But her knuckles were white, her jaw trembled slightly. Jason fared no better. His soaked shirt clung to his skin. He kept stealing glances at the open cabin door, half expecting Loretta to return and demand they kneel and beg. But she didn't return. She didn't need to. Inside the jet, Loretta's voice broke the silence, measured, unmistakable. Lauren, connect me to Ethan and the full board of directors. Right now. Her phone speaker echoed faintly inside the cabin. Her tone wasn't raised. It didn't need to be. It was the kind of voice that told everyone within earshot that something irreversible was about to happen. On the other end, the executive assistant's breath caught. Right away, Ms. Bennett. Hold for Ethan. Loretta waited, calm as stone. Then came the familiar voice of her brother, Ethan Bennett, COO of Bennett Aviation. Steady, brilliant, protective. Loretta, are you all right? What's happening? Her reply came with surgical precision. I'm being denied entry onto my own jet, at my own airport, by employees who think their prejudice outranks protocol. A pause. Excuse me? Emma Roberts, Jason Miller. Security was called, passes were mocked, credentials ignored, The surveillance footage will speak for itself, but I need a board meeting convened within the hour. Another pause. But this one was full of something more dangerous than shock, controlled fury. Understood. I'm on my way. You'll have full support. Loretta ended the call, slipped her phone into her coat, and then waited, because the wheels were already turning. Back outside the jet, Jason's mind spiraled. He watched ground staff whisper, some turning away. He saw Mia Collins, the young ramp attendant, standing near the hangar door, her eyes wide with both shame and something else. Admiration. Jason looked at Emma, hoping she'd say something to fix this. But Emma's arrogance was cracking at the seams. She's bluffing, Emma muttered, mostly to herself. Anyone can say they're important. Jason didn't respond. He couldn't, because deep down he knew she wasn't bluffing. Everything about Loretta's presence, the silence, the stillness, the poise under pressure, was exactly what real power looked like. And he had laughed in its face. Meanwhile, in the control room, Lucas Parker, the ground operations supervisor, hovered near the radio. He'd seen everything, heard every word, and done nothing. Now, as shame crept up the back of his neck, he reached for the phone and called internal security. Pull all camera footage from Gate 4, everything from the last 2 hours, he said. The response on the other end was crisp, already requested by the executive team. Lucas hung up. Too late. Inside the Gulf Stream, Loretta sat calmly as the storm played out around her. But inside her heart, a quieter storm brooded. This wasn't the first time she'd been underestimated. Wasn't the first time she'd been told she didn't belong. But what cut deeper now was that it had happened in her own empire, built brick by brick on the promises of excellence and inclusion. And somehow the rot had still crept in. Not in policy, but in people. Not in writing, but in instinct. She had spent her life building a ladder only for others to decide who got to climb it. Not anymore. Just then the sound of sirens began to echo faintly through the terminal's private corridor. Tires splashed over wet pavement. The unmistakable convoy of black executive SUVs had arrived at Westchester. Ethan Bennett stepped out of the first one. Tall, sharp-suited, his jaw set in grim determination. Behind him, senior legal counsel, corporate HR, and 3 members of the board. Not one of them had expressions of curiosity, only fury and facts. From the tarmac, Emma's face drained of color as the convoy door opened. Jason's knees buckled slightly. "Oh no," he whispered. Mia stepped back slowly, as if watching a forest fire begin to spread. Ethan didn't speak at first. He scanned the scene. The jet, the drenched tarmac, the frozen staff, and then finally his eyes locked on Emma and Jason. He didn't need to guess what had happened. He already knew. He turned to the HR director beside him. "Seal off access to the lounge, the runway, and the employee locker rooms. Nobody leaves. Nobody erases anything. I want every camera, every mic, every log reviewed by noon tomorrow." The HR director nodded. "Yes, sir?" Jason tried to speak, but his throat betrayed him. Emma forced a smile, the wrong kind. "Mr. Bennett, there seems to have been some confusion." "Confusion?" Ethan repeated slowly. "We didn't know it was your sister," she stammered. "She didn't say—" "You didn't ask," Ethan snapped. "You assumed, you profiled, and now you're standing in the middle of a PR and legal disaster of your own making." Emma's face flushed. "We were only doing our duty." "No," Ethan said. "You were doing what felt safe to you, and what felt safe was dismissing an elderly black woman as a liar and a trespasser." His voice dropped to a colder register. "That wasn't duty. That was cowardice." He brushed past them and walked straight up the stairs to the open jet door. When he stepped into the cabin, his expression changed. There, seated exactly as she had been for the last half hour, was his sister. Still dignified, still calm, still soaked from rain that wasn't entirely weather. Ethan dropped the formality, his voice softened. "Loretta." She looked up at him, and something in her eyes, something old and tired but steel hard, made his throat tighten. "I'm okay," she said before he could speak, But the company isn't. He nodded. We'll fix that. I want every name, she said. Not just Emma, not just Jason. I want to know who watched this happen and said nothing. That's the rot. And it goes deeper than two fools with uniforms. Ethan didn't argue, because she was right. Outside, the wind picked up. A hard gust ripped through the trees, lining the edge of the tarmac. But the loudest noise wasn't the wind or the rain. It was the silence between Emma and Jason, the final few seconds of delusion slipping away from them. The call had been made. The board was awake, and the reckoning had begun. Outside the Gulf Stream, the rain slowed to a whisper. Not because the storm had passed, but because the storm had entered the room. Inside the private jet cabin, Loretta Bennett remained seated at the head of the long, chrome-edged table, her posture unchanged. Her cane stood upright beside her like a scepter of quiet defiance. Ethan Bennett stood just behind her, scanning the room, jaw set. And outside on the tarmac, everything had stopped moving. The line between guilty and innocent wasn't subtle anymore. It was written across faces, heavy as floodlights. Emma Roberts, for all her sharp uniforms and sharper tongue, was now pale and still. The security team had surrounded the lounge entrance. The company's internal investigators had begun collecting security camera footage. Jason Miller sat slumped against the baggage cart nearby, his face in his hands. His authority had evaporated like steam, leaving behind only sweat and silence. But amid the hushed chaos, Mia Collins stood alone, her fists clenched inside the pockets of her damp coat. She had watched it all unfold. The humiliation, the disrespect, the way the other staff looked away when Loretta was asked to leave. And every time Loretta had responded with calm, the silence in the room grew heavier with shame. Now it was unbearable. Mia had kept her head down for 6 months at this job. She knew the hierarchy, knew the unwritten rules. But today she had watched something sacred be violated, and she had done nothing. Her legs moved before her fear could stop them. She crossed the tarmac slowly. Every footstep felt like a battle between duty and doubt. Jason lifted his head as she passed, but said nothing. Emma stared at her, confused. Why is she walking toward the jet, she thought. Mia paused at the bottom of the aircraft steps, eyes blinking through the last of the rain. The flight crew guarding the door exchanged a glance, then stepped aside. She took the stairs one by one, each one heavier than the last. Inside, Loretta looked up. She didn't look surprised. She just looked patient. Mia swallowed hard. Her voice cracked. She tried again. Miss Bennett, I wanted to say I'm sorry. Loretta didn't speak. She let the words fill the room. Mia continued, trembling. I saw what they did to you. I saw you standing in the rain. I saw them laugh at your ID the way they dismissed you. I didn't speak up. I was afraid. And now I feel like a coward. A long silence followed. Then Loretta gave the smallest nod. It wasn't dramatic, but it meant something deeper than forgiveness. Thank you, she said quietly. That's more honesty than I've heard all day. Mia's eyes filled with tears. I just couldn't leave without saying something. You didn't deserve any of it. None of it. Loretta's face softened, but her voice remained calm. No one ever does. Behind her, Ethan watched silently, nodding once in approval. Then Mia stepped aside as if ready to leave. But a new voice sliced through the air like cold steel. Miss Collins, Emma snapped from the bottom of the steps. You're out of line. This isn't your place. Get back to your post. Mia froze. Emma stood below, her uniform soaked, hair wild from the wind, but her voice was sharp as ever, desperate, clinging to the last scraps of her authority. You have no authority to speak on behalf of this company, Emma barked, and if you continue, I'll see to it that disciplinary action is filed. You'll do no such thing. Loretta's voice cut clean through Emma's tirade. The tone was different now. Not quiet, not soft. It rang with finality. Emma shut her mouth as if someone had slammed a door on her breath. Loretta stood slowly, placing one hand on her cane and the other gently on Mia's shoulder. This young woman, Loretta said, her voice measured and strong, is the only person in this entire facility who had the integrity to speak the truth. The only one who stepped forward with honesty, not excuses. Emma's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Loretta turned to Mia and nodded again. Whatever happens next, you should know. I remember the ones who show courage, even in small moments, especially in small moments. Mia's eyes filled again, but this time not with shame, something closer to pride. Outside the jet, the silence was replaced by shifting glances. Lucas Parker, standing nearby, lowered his head. He remembered how he, too, had hesitated. He had almost asked Emma to check the manifest, almost defended Loretta. But almost was just another name for cowardice, and he had stayed silent. Now Mia had done what the rest of them didn't, and it made every other bystander feel smaller. Emma, now trembling in the open doorway, tried one last time to salvage her pride. I was protecting the flight, she said weakly. That's my job. Security. Loretta turned slowly to face her. No, she said, you weren't protecting anyone. You were protecting your ego. Emma tried to respond. Loretta stepped forward, one step, then another. I asked you twice if you were sure, she said. You doubled down. You mocked me. You called security. You raised your voice like I was a threat to be contained. Her voice dropped. You tried to humiliate me. Emma looked away, her composure buckling. You didn't just fail at your job, Loretta continued. You failed as a human being. Jason stood nearby, listening, his shoulders slumped like he'd aged 10 years. Loretta turned her gaze to him now. And you, she said, you saw the name Bennett in the system. You read the CEO title, but you looked at my face and decided it couldn't be true. Jason swallowed. He looked like he wanted to disappear. Loretta turned back to Mia, placing a hand over hers. Truth, she said, always finds its way out of silence. And today it came through you. Then she looked over Mia's shoulder toward the cluster of board members and legal staff descending the SUV steps. And now, she said, her voice rising just enough to be heard across the wind, the rest of this truth is going to get very loud. The rain had softened to a drizzle now, like the storm was taking a breath, watching, waiting to see what kind of people remained after it passed. And in the quiet, truth arrived. The hush over Westchester's private tarmac was heavier than any thunder. Everyone had heard Loretta's name. They'd heard the titles, the legacy, the lawsuits, the empire. But for people like Emma Roberts and Jason Miller, hearing wasn't believing. Not yet. Because some people don't believe until the truth walks up and slaps them in the face with paper. It came in the hands of Captain Richard Davis. He stepped down from the cockpit slowly, his pilot's tablet trembling slightly in his hand. His years of experience couldn't stop the weight settling on his chest, the weight of shame. His voice wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. Emma, he called, low but sharp. She turned, still holding on to the remnants of her pride like a child clutching a frayed blanket. I need you to see this. She hesitated. What is it? Something you should have checked before calling security, he said. Emma approached slowly, water dripping from her sleeves, her heels silent on the wet tarmac. Captain Davis turned the screen toward her. There it was. Passenger manifest. Flight BAV 70221. L. Bennett, owner, CEO. The top line. The first name. Not buried, not hidden. The name she had dismissed, mocked, and humiliated. Printed in digital black and white, and stamped with the kind of authority no prejudice could overwrite. Emma's breath caught. Her lips moved, but no words came out. Jason stepped forward behind her, peering over her shoulder, and froze. He didn't gasp, he didn't shout, he just crumbled. The reality hit him with the slow, unbearable weight of 1,000 bad decisions catching up all at once. She was, he whispered, voice hollow. She really is. Neither finished the sentence, because everyone on that ramp already knew. Inside the aircraft, Loretta Bennett watched from the open door. She could see their faces, the denial breaking, the defenses folding in on themselves like wet cardboard. She had seen that look before, when bank managers realized they denied a loan to the company that would later surpass their annual revenue. She had seen it in boardrooms, courtrooms, even classrooms. And now she saw it here on her own runway. The look that said, we didn't just make a mistake, we told the wrong person they didn't belong. Ethan Bennett had returned to the tarmac, flanked by legal and security personnel. His expression was steel. He didn't look at Emma or Jason. He looked at the tablet, then at Loretta, then at the two people who had tried to rewrite reality with their assumptions. Let's be crystal clear, he said, his voice flat and lethal. The manifest was always correct. The failure here wasn't technological. It was human. Jason nodded rapidly, trying to find footing. I didn't recognize her. That's all. If I had, you did recognize her, Ethan interrupted. You just didn't believe her. Emma's jaw clenched. We were under pressure. People sneak onto jets. And do they all look like her? Loretta's voice cut cleanly through the group. Everyone turned. She stood now at the top of the stairs, one hand on the polished rail, the other resting calmly on the curve of her cane. Or is it just the ones who don't look like your idea of first class? Emma tried to speak, but every excuse felt like a lie now, even to her. Loretta took one step down, then another. You saw an old woman, she continued, alone, quiet, brown-skinned, moving slowly. That was all the evidence you needed. A tear slid down Emma's cheek, mixing with the rain. I thought I was doing my job, she said weakly. Loretta reached the bottom of the stairs. No, she said, you were doing your judgment. Jason stepped forward now, his voice barely holding together. Miss Bennett, I saw the name on the screen. I saw it said Bennett. I just thought, you thought I was lying, Loretta finished for him, because you've never seen a woman who looks like me run something like this. Jason's shoulders sagged. He looked down at the ground. Silence. The rain returned in slow, rhythmic drops, each one like a metronome to their guilt. From the side of the ramp, Mia Collins watched with wide eyes. The power of Loretta's words wasn't in their volume. It was in their certainty. Mia had never seen someone move so deliberately through humiliation and transform it into power without ever once raising their voice. And now everyone else was seeing it too. Loretta turned to Ethan. You have the manifest, the footage, the logs. Ethan nodded. Everything's secured. Our people have the footage from every lounge camera and tarmac angle. We'll begin a formal inquiry immediately. Emma's voice cracked. Please. I've worked here for years. You've never been caught, Loretta said simply. Jason tried again. We didn't mean harm. Harm isn't always about intention, she said. It's about impact. And the impact here was clear. I was denied access to my own plane, called a liar, threatened with security, and treated like a criminal in a place I built. The silence was deafening now. Even the wind had stopped. Then Loretta did something no one expected. She stepped back, calmly, gracefully, as if she had said what she needed to say, and now it was up to everyone else to deal with the truth. But just before she turned, she looked at Emma one last time. You were so sure I didn't belong, she said softly. But ask yourself now, what does that say about where you belong? Then she climbed the steps back into her jet, not in anger, in command. The door of the Gulfstream G700 shut behind Loretta Bennett with a hiss, not loud, not angry, just final. Outside, the last few raindrops broke apart across the tarmac. Thunder had moved on, but the tension it left behind was thicker than smoke. Emma Roberts and Jason Miller stood motionless in the drizzle, drenched and deflated. No longer staff, just suspects, stripped of the illusion of superiority they had worn like a uniform. Now the uniform only made them look small. Then came the sound of polished leather shoes stepping onto the tarmac. Deliberate, synchronized, practiced. The executive board had arrived. One by one they exited the black SUVs, legal counsel, ethics officers, the director of operations, and senior HR, all flanked by a company security detail, now tasked not with guarding Loretta, but with preserving the truth. Ethan Bennett, still seething beneath his professional calm, led them forward. Secure the aircraft, he said to the guards, then begin the internal hearing protocol. No leaks, no back channels. This stays in-house until every fact is documented. Two security team members entered the aircraft ahead of the board. The others surrounded the lounge area, quietly collecting ID cards from staff and ushering silent employees away from the scene. Emma turned toward Ethan, desperate now. "I didn't know who she was," she pleaded, voice cracking. "She didn't act like anyone important." "You mean she didn't act like you expected someone important to act?" Ethan shot back. "You weren't doing your job. You were playing God." Jason didn't speak. He'd given up on defending himself. He simply stared at the tarmac, wet lashes blinking slowly, like a man trying to wake up from a nightmare of his own making. Inside the jet, Loretta waited. She had changed into a dry navy jacket, her shawl folded neatly beside her. Her cane rested against the conference table as she sat at its head. Not slouched, not smiling, just steady. The cabin door opened, and the company's top decision-makers filed in. Ethan took the seat to her right. The others filled the leather chairs around the table like members of a tribunal. No one spoke until she did. Loretta looked around, her eyes landing briefly on each face. "Shut the door," she said. The soft click behind them echoed like a gavel. "I assume you've all reviewed the manifest?" Nods all around. "And the security footage?" "Multiple angles," said the legal director. "Everything from the lounge, the ramp, and the staircase was recorded in high definition. We also recovered audio, every word." "Good," Loretta said. "Then let's begin." Back outside, Lucas Parker, the ground supervisor, stood near the fence watching the jet. He was dry now. Dry and burning with guilt. He could have said something earlier, could have stopped Emma, could have double-checked the manifest, but he hadn't. Mia Collins, meanwhile, sat on a metal bench inside the employee area, her uniform still damp, hands folded tightly. The others had finally begun asking her what happened. She didn't say much, but they saw it in her face. She'd stood up, and everyone else hadn't. Back on the plane, Loretta looked around the table. Her voice remained even. "There will be no PR team spinning this. No legal maneuvering to make it go away. This wasn't an error. It was a culture rot, and it ends today." No one dared interrupt. She turned to the HR director. "Emma Roberts, Jason Miller. Effective immediately, they are to be terminated. Full dismissal, strip access, collect badges, issue exit protocols. They are not to set foot on another Bennett Aviation property." "Yes, ma'am," the HR director nodded. "They are not scapegoats," Loretta continued. "They are symptoms, but we begin with them." Next, she turned to Captain Davis. "Captain," she said, voice slightly softer, "you had the manifest in your hands. You saw my name, and still you did nothing. Why?" Captain Davis straightened in his seat, shame pressing into his spine. "I didn't think it could be you," he said quietly. "Not alone, not without a team. You didn't fit the image." Loretta let the silence answer that. "I accept your admission," she said, "but the lapse in judgment was unacceptable. You're suspended, effective immediately, pending full internal review." Davis bowed his head. "Yes, ma'am." Back outside, Jason and Emma were escorted into a side building by security. No handcuffs, no shouting, but the quiet formality of it, the way staff parted to let them through, the way no one dared meet their eyes was worse than handcuffs. Emma's tears had stopped. Her defiance had too. What replaced them was panic, the dawning horror that her career was over. Not because of one mistake, but because of who she made that mistake to, and what it revealed about her character. Jason, walking behind her, looked like he'd aged 10 years in 20 minutes. He didn't speak, didn't blink, just walked. Both knew there was no salvaging what had been exposed. Back in the cabin, Loretta continued. "This company will not move forward with apologies alone yet," she said. "It will move forward with systems." She turned to the ethics officer. "Every employee, executive, manager, crew, lounge staff will undergo mandatory anti-bias training, in person, monitored, audited. Refusals will be grounds for termination." Then she turned to the legal counsel. "We'll launch a third-party audit. I want anonymous reports. I want every employee who's been ignored, silenced, or profiled to be heard." without retaliation. Finally, she looked at the board chair. I built this company with my own hands. I put my name on every jet in this fleet. But that name means nothing if this company becomes the kind of place where a black old woman with a cane can be mistaken for a trespasser in her own empire. The room was silent. No one had the courage or the ignorance to speak. She leaned forward. And if that ever happens again, she said, her voice low and sharp, it won't be a suspension. It will be a funeral. Then she stood. Meeting adjourned. Outside the jet, the sun finally broke through the clouds. A single golden beam struck the Gulf Stream like a spotlight from heaven itself. But this wasn't redemption. Not yet. This was reckoning. And it had finally arrived. The next morning, Loretta Bennett arrived at Bennett Aviation's global headquarters, not through the executive entrance, but through the front lobby. No assistants, no entourage, no press. Just a tall cane, a navy blue wool coat, and the unmistakable presence of a woman who was no longer waiting for the world to catch up. She didn't walk like someone seeking revenge. She walked like someone taking back everything. By noon, 4 departments had been shut down for internal review. 27 staff members had been suspended pending investigation. Company-wide access to lounge and flight footage archives had been restricted to a select ethics oversight panel created by Loretta that very morning. The media hadn't even caught wind yet, but inside Bennett Aviation, shockwaves. And they weren't ripples, they were tsunamis. In the HR wing, a massive whiteboard listed names under 3 categories: witnesses who stayed silent, staff who participated, employees who spoke up. One name was in bold at the bottom of that last column: Mia Collins. No title, no position, just the only one who apologized. Inside a private glass-walled meeting room, Loretta stood before a dozen executives, each sitting stiffly in high-backed chairs, eyes lowered like school children summoned to the principal. Behind her, a massive LED display that read, "Culture isn't a slogan, it's a choice." Some of you were promoted because of your quarterly numbers, Loretta said, hands folded gently over her cane. Others because of your strategy, your networking, your degrees. She paused. Not one of you was promoted because of your character. The silence in the room was oxygen thin. She stepped forward. When my name was questioned on that manifest, she continued, no one in the chain of command questioned the reaction. They questioned me. She tapped the cane against the floor once. It echoed. Now, let me be clear. From this day forward, we are no longer tolerating the kind of competence without conscience that built this rot. Then she handed out new documentation, a reform package over 80 pages long. It included mandatory ethics certification for all employees, bias and blind spot training co-created with civil rights experts, whistleblower protections, enforceable immediately, leadership restructuring with performance reviews tied to inclusivity metrics. But the most controversial? Blind promotion review boards. No names, no photos, just merit and impact. If you're afraid of being evaluated without your title or appearance, Loretta said softly, you were never leading. You were hiding. Downstairs in the operations department, security escorted out 2 mid-level managers who had been caught on lounge footage laughing behind Loretta's back while she was being turned away. One of them tried to protest. We didn't do anything to her directly. You didn't have to, the ethics officer said. You watched. You smirked. You let it happen. They left quietly. Meanwhile, on the company's internal portal, a short email from Loretta went viral within hours. From Loretta Bennett. Subject, your silence was a policy. So is this. To all Bennett Aviation staff. Date, 6:42 a.m. I was publicly humiliated on my own property. Not because I raised my voice, not because I violated a rule, but because I didn't look like what power is expected to look like. Some of you watched it happen. Some of you stopped it. Most of you froze. I will not punish fear, but I will not protect cowardice. We will build a company where nobody ever wonders if they belong. That begins with you. Choose wisely. Loretta, by 10 a.m., over 9,000 employees had opened the email. By noon, it had been printed and pinned to break room walls across 15 cities. By evening, it was screenshotted and sent anonymously to media outlets, though no one at the company tried to stop it. Because something had changed, something real. Mia Collins, meanwhile, sat nervously in a waiting room on the 42nd floor. Her hair was still damp from the subway. Her hands fidgeted in her lap. She had been called up by an assistant earlier that morning with no explanation. Now she sat alone, waiting. Then the door opened. "Miss Collins," a woman said. "She's ready for you." Mia stood, wiped her palms on her skirt, entered. Inside, a quiet office overlooking the city skyline. At the desk, Loretta. "Sit," she said kindly. Mia obeyed, stiff with nerves. "I don't bite," Loretta smiled. "I just correct." That earned a small smile. "You spoke up when it mattered," Loretta said. "And more importantly, you did it not to protect yourself, but to honor the truth." Mia said nothing, too stunned to speak. "I'm offering you a new position," Loretta continued. "Entry level in our Office of Ethics and Culture. Title, Compliance Liaison. Salary starts at double what you're earning now." Mia gasped. "What? I don't have experience. I didn't even go to college." "You have experience now," Loretta said. "You saw something wrong and told the truth. That's more than most resumes ever prove." Mia's voice cracked. "I don't know what to say." Loretta smiled gently. "Say yes." Elsewhere on the production floor, whispers turned into nods, nods into conversations, and conversations into a cultural shift. People had watched a black old woman walk into the storm and come out the other side, not yelling, not burning things down, but rebuilding them brick by brick with her bare hands. No one called it a revolution, but everyone knew that's exactly what it was. The world moved on. New headlines came, markets opened, flights took off. But Emma Roberts couldn't move past what she saw in the mirror. 3 weeks had passed since she was escorted off the tarmac, her badge deactivated, her title removed with a keystroke. She hadn't gone online. She hadn't updated her resume. She hadn't even unpacked the box of things from her desk, because something deeper than career damage had taken hold. Conscience. Not guilt, not self-pity, but that cold, heavy awareness of who she'd become when no one was watching, and who she had hurt in the process. It haunted her. Not just the memory of Loretta Bennett standing in the rain, not just the sound of her own voice dismissing someone so effortlessly. It was the look in Loretta's eyes. Disappointment without hate. That was what broke her. Emma finally opened her laptop on a Sunday night. The cursor blinked on a blank email draft. She wrote, erased, wrote again. Then with hands trembling, to Loretta Bennett at bennettaviation.com. Subject, there are no excuses. Dear Ms. Bennett, I do not expect forgiveness. I don't even expect a reply. But I need to say this for whatever it's worth. I was wrong, not just in what I said, but in what I believed without question. You weren't just treated unfairly, you were dehumanized, and I was the one who let it. The worst part is I thought I was being professional, that I was enforcing policy. But now I see clearly, I was enforcing bias dressed as protocol. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't retaliate. You stood there with dignity. While I unraveled, you taught me something that day, not just about leadership, but about humanity. If you ever find it within yourself to speak with me, I would be grateful. If not, I will still carry this lesson for the rest of my life. Emma Roberts. She read it 5 times before sending it, then closed the laptop and stared out the window, unsure what would hurt more, a silence or a response. The reply came 5 days later, short, unemotional, but not unkind. From Loretta Bennett. Subject, there are no excuses. Emma, I received your email. I believe you are sincere. You are right. There are no excuses, but there are consequences. You faced yours. Now, the only question is whether you turn that experience into something useful. I don't grant forgiveness as a performance. I offer it to those willing to make repair part of their legacy. If you're ready for that, come speak to me. Friday, noon, 1 hour. No promises, just truth. LB, Emma stared at the screen in disbelief, not at the invitation, at the chance. That Friday she arrived 10 minutes early. She wore no makeup, no heels, no badge, just humility. The lobby was quiet, everyone knew who she was, but no one stopped her. The receptionist gestured toward the elevator. She's expecting you. On the 42nd floor, Emma stepped into the office once again. The same one that had become legend since the story broke. The same one where Mia Collins now worked just 3 doors down. Inside, Loretta sat behind her desk, hands folded calmly. Her cane rested nearby like it always did, a reminder of the weight she carried and still stood above. Emma entered slowly. Sit, Loretta said. She did. I read your email, Loretta said, studying her. What do you want from me? Emma swallowed. Not a job, not a second chance at the company. I just want to hear what you saw in me that day on the tarmac. Loretta looked at her, really looked. What I saw, she said slowly, was a woman so afraid of losing control, she'd rather humiliate a stranger than pause for 5 seconds and consider she might be wrong. Emma's breath caught. Loretta leaned forward. But what I also saw, she added, was a woman whose shame wasn't fake, who didn't run, who wrote when she could have disappeared. Emma said nothing. Her eyes welled up. There are people in this building, Loretta continued, with perfect track records and rotten souls. And there are others, like you, who failed spectacularly, but are willing to be reborn. Emma blinked back tears. I'm willing. Loretta nodded. Then here's what you'll do. She handed her a folder. Inside, an invitation to speak, not to the press, not to the public, but to the company's internal ethics training initiative. A panel titled, What I Thought I Knew, a Confession from the Inside. Tell them everything, Loretta said. Not the sanitized version, not the bullet points, the truth, humiliation, fear, bias, the moment it all cracked. Tell them so they see themselves. And maybe we'll all be a little more human afterward. Emma stared at the folder. You'd trust me to speak? I don't trust you, Loretta said. Not yet, but I trust the version of you that wrote that email. Then, after a long pause, she added, Don't waste the pain. Emma stood slowly, hands trembling. I won't. She walked out the door changed, not because she'd been forgiven, but because she'd been challenged to become someone worthy of it. That same month, over 300 Bennett Aviation employees attended the first of many internal trainings led by Loretta's newly formed Human Dignity Division. On the main screen, Emma's face appeared via live stream, nervous, raw, unedited. She opened her mouth and told the truth. The cameras were already rolling when Loretta Bennett stepped up to the mahogany podium inside the House Subcommittee on Corporate Ethics and Discrimination. She wore a deep gray suit, no jewelry, no aide standing behind her, just her cane resting against the lectern and a folder in her hand. Not for notes, but for history. This wasn't the Loretta the world had seen on the tarmac, soaked and silent. This was Loretta in full, not yelling and not shaming, just speaking. And as she adjusted the microphone, the entire chamber leaned forward, because even the members of Congress knew this wasn't a routine hearing. This was a reckoning turned into testimony. C-SPAN aired it live. The White House requested a transcript. Colleges began streaming it in classrooms. But none of that had happened yet. What happened first was this. Loretta looked up, met the eyes of every lawmaker, every staffer, every reporter in the room. Then she began. I built a company that now moves 3 million people across continents every year. I did it starting with one leased plane, a used desktop computer, and a reputation that was constantly doubted. Not because I lacked competence, but because I was an old black woman who refused to walk, talk, or dress like power was expected to. I earned everything they said people like me could only inherit from white husbands. And still, I was mistaken for a trespasser in the house I built. The room was silent, no coughs, no keyboard clicks. She continued, this isn't just my story. It's your airport gate, your hiring board, your bank lobby, your hospital waiting room. It's every space where people like me are asked to prove we belong, while others are waved through without question. What happened to me was not an accident. It was a reflection, a mirror held up to the system, and we can either smash the mirror or change the reflection. A soft murmur from the back rows. A congresswoman leaned forward, visibly moved. Loretta scanned the crowd again. I didn't come here to call for vengeance. I came to ask this nation, when did belonging become a look? When did professional become a skin tone? And when did we all start confusing quiet dignity for weakness? No one looked away now. Even the usually distracted interns were frozen. We have a choice in this country, Loretta said, voice clear, to keep building systems that punish difference, or design systems that expect it, welcome it, defend it. She held up a page. This is the letter from the woman who humiliated me on the tarmac. She now speaks at our corporate trainings, not because she was forgiven, but because she was willing to tell the truth. Then softly, I don't believe in canceling people. I believe in consequences, followed by the chance to return different. Murmurs again, louder this time. The C-SPAN chat lit up with, who is this woman? Why haven't we heard of her before? Put her in charge of something bigger. Loretta placed the letter down and looked up one final time. America doesn't need louder leaders. We need braver ones. We need leaders who can stand in the rain and still choose grace. That's what saved my company. That's what might save yours. And with that, she stepped back. No dramatic ending. No applause from the room, yet. Just stillness. And then a slow rise. One by one, the entire room stood, not as a formality, but because something inside them had moved. The next day, Loretta's speech became the most watched C-SPAN clip of the decade. It was quoted in Senate debates, printed on T-shirts, studied in business schools, used as a hiring case study in Fortune 100 companies. And more quietly and more powerfully, it was replayed in the minds of thousands of gate agents, middle managers, nurses, receptionists, recruiters, who started asking themselves, would I have stopped her too? At Bennett Aviation, a new plaque was installed at the Westchester Terminal Gate where it all happened. It read, here stood Loretta Bennett, and here she stayed. May every passenger be treated as if they own the skies. Mia Collins was promoted again, this time to Regional Ethics Coordinator. She still tells the story to new hires every Monday. Emma Roberts now speaks at universities on unconscious bias. Her TED Talk, The Day I Profiled My CEO, hit 12 million views. Jason Miller faded from headlines. He declined interviews. But one day, quietly, he sent a donation to a scholarship fund started in Loretta's name. No message, just a note, for the ones I failed to see. And Loretta, she stepped away from the CEO title that year, not in defeat, in triumph. She remained chairwoman of the board, but gave day-to-day power to the next generation. In her final company-wide message, she wrote, I do not want to be remembered for surviving humiliation. I want to be remembered for refusing to humiliate back and still winning. Because dignity is louder than rage. And sometimes the most powerful revenge is justice, followed by legacy.